All right, last week we started our series, Should I Shut Down? Talking about throwing in the off season and some of the do's and don'ts. For that, we talked about, do you actually have enough time? And we spoke about 14 weeks being kind of the golden number for what we like our guys to have if we're doing a full 2-month shutdown plus a 6-week buildup. Today we're talking about, do you actually need time off, with the emphasis on the need. So first thing is looking at, are there physical limitations? Do you have physical limitations that are preventing you from reaching your peak performance, or could possibly lead to injury risks down the road? There's no better time to address these than in the off season. Obviously, if you're playing a couple times a week, starting once a week, it's really hard to make lasting physical changes to your body, and you would need the time in the off season. And we spoke last week about giving the shoulder time to heal, the arm time to heal, with all of the micro trauma that you incur from throwing a baseball every time that you throw. So having some time off would allow your body to kind of naturally heal and make those changes and get rid of the limitations. The other big thing, and we're going to focus on high school athletes here, is where are you in the recruiting process? So we're going to use an example of a high school senior that is committed to a Power 5 school. So think Florida, Florida State, Miami, since we're in Florida, one of those schools where they're going to be graduating, and then they'll be attending summer school most likely, and going through their program in the summer, versus a sophomore in high school who is playing JV. So we're talking about the fall of their senior or sophomore year. So we have senior versus sophomore. Okay, so this kid probably threw the senior probably threw a large majority of innings in high school. So we're in for the high school season, for the spring season. So their junior year, they probably threw 60 innings in the spring. 20 innings would probably be on the low end during the summer. And then somewhere close to another 20 innings during the fall. And it might be 30 and 10 or 70 and 20 and 10 or something. But the idea is that number is going to be around 100 innings for, again, in Florida it's a little bit different, a little bit longer season, but that number is usually around 100 innings for someone that's that high caliber of a pitcher. Innings isn't the best metric to go off of for workload. Obviously if they're having 6 pitch innings in high school games and they're throwing 60 innings, is a lot different than the normal 14 pitch inning average. But we're going to go off that for right now. The sophomore might have thrown 20 innings for his high school team, 20 innings in the summer, and 10 innings in the fall. So he is at 50 innings, which is obviously 50% of the workload. The senior, if he's committed to a Power 5 school, can probably checks a few more boxes, like velocity, pitch design, accuracy, command, that sort of thing, where the sophomore probably isn't committing that or checking all those boxes, because if they were, they would already be being recruited. So this is a big thing, is just where are they developmentally, and what are they doing in their innings. We'll go into a deep dive for microcycles, macrocycles for the year before and the year after next week. But just to give an example, obviously one guy has done a lot more work during the year than the other. And one person in this example needs a lot more development than the other person. So if we're looking to check boxes of and get some work in the off season to develop velo, pitch design, and command, can't do that if you're shutting down for a long period of time. So if the athlete needs this, it's the old adage, you can't get better at something if you don't do it. If you're not throwing a baseball for 2 months, you can't get better at throwing a baseball. And if you're a sophomore, especially a junior or a senior that's uncommitted, if you're a senior that's uncommitted, you really can't take time off because you can't sacrifice that developmental time. You'll have to find it somewhere else in the year. And again, we'll talk about that next week. But again, if we have a sophomore, this guy is going to pitch on his varsity team next year, probably not going to log a ton of innings depending on the program. And so we probably need to be a little bit more aggressive with this person so they have a chance to play college baseball, as opposed to someone who has a scholarship already and already has some very tangible skills at that level. But again, it's much easier if we spend those 8 weeks for this person throwing we're going to be able to do a lot more velo. We're going to be able to spend a lot more time with pitch design. And then if we need to do the command work as well, we can taper that in as they get closer and closer to the high school season. One other note on command is there are some guys who feel like they lose feel of the baseball when they shut down. And they don't pick up a baseball or touch a baseball for 2 months. And we'll talk about this a little bit more further down the road in this series. But for those guys, there's no reason that they can't play catch at a very, very low intensity. And we'll go over some instructional videos on what we mean by this, because throwing a baseball 60 feet can mean something completely different depending on the intensity put into it. So what I've heard is like someone like Max Scherzer does not actually shut down every year. He plays catch 3 or 4 times a week at 60 to 90 feet at a super, super low intensity. So for all intents and purposes, he's given himself time off or rest, but his arm's still going through the motion. He has a ball in his hand. He's feeling the release point every single time. If you're a guy that can't throw a strike, back to the command point, but you have these two things, you have really good velo, and your pitch design doesn't need much work because you profile really well to have plus stuff, but your command is not there, then shutting down for 2 months, probably not the best thing. Again, shutting down meaning not touching a baseball. You need to feel a release point. You need to understand how the ball's coming out of your hand and around the same spot every single time. So something like a throwing program where you're working at a very low intensity and just have a target that you're consistently throwing at would be something that we would suggest using instead of completely shutting off. So I hope you get the idea from this video and through our series. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. Even if you have the time, maybe we can use the time to do something else. And because someone else is shutting down and you're not, or you're not shutting down and someone else is, doesn't mean the other person's wrong. And it's kind of a misnomer that we hope to kind of clear up and give you some guidance to what you should do for your own player development.